Hi there, Camille. More essays from you. Great work. Nice to see you working so hard and so promptly. So let's see what you did in this set, shall we? Food travels thousands of miles from producers to consumers. Some people think that it is better for the environment and economy if people only ate the local food produced by farmers. To what extent do you agree or disagree? Let's see. Environmental experts throughout both the developing and developed world have debated whether eating locally grown food instead of imported food is more beneficial for the environment and the economy. Some believe this to be true. Don't you think you need another linker here? And so some people believe this would be true, and personally I strongly agree. This says we'll argue in favor of eating local, using examples from federal agencies to demonstrate points and prove arguments. Lovely. On the one hand, there is ample evidence that eating local has a positive impact on consumers and producers, such as farmers. This is because purchasing local food promotes a sense of community as consumers recognize that they are supporting the local economy. They also relish the opportunity to know the people behind the product. For example, recent empirical research by the National Agricultural Statistics demonstrated that 75% of Australian families visit local markets on average 10 times per year because they like to support and meet their local farmers. Therefore, it is conclusively clear that buying local food can benefit the economy and community, respectively. Okay, so far, let's take a look at this. Environment and economy. You only talked about the economy. What about the environment? You really spent a lot of time talking about sense of community, local economy, knowing the people, support the local farmers, economy. But there's nothing about environment, so I really want you to be careful. Even though I enjoyed reading it, it was lovely, it flowed beautifully, you really have to be careful to make sure that you are including all parts of the task. Otherwise, the IELTS examiner is going to say that the answer only partially addresses the task, okay? And that's absolutely going to cost you a lot of points in your band score for task achievement, okay? Let's move on to your next paragraph. On the other hand, although there is a case for imported food enriching the ethnic experience, okay, now, Camille, I'm very confused about this. This kind of sentence would make sense if it had been what you discussed in this paragraph, but it didn't. Okay, you didn't discuss this at all. So this is a type of cohesive device yeah, it's a device essentially that you can use if you had addressed ethnic food and ethnic experience and imported food in the previous paragraph. But now it's just coming out of left field and it doesn't make sense here. Okay, let's see. So basically, I have to disagree with this entire sentence, and from what I can tell from the development of this paragraph, you're not talking about the other side of the argument at all. You're only talking about the one side of the argument. So even this, on the one hand, on the other hand, are inappropriate. Okay? It would have been better if you had said firstly, secondly. Okay? So let's assume you had written firstly here. Here you could have written secondly. The impact of the quality of local food on our health cannot be overstated. This is largely because local food is fresher as it is picked at peak times and contains less preservatives. For example, an extensive study by World Health Organization showed that over 90% of imported food, 90% of food imported by plane contained a dangerously high content of preservatives. Consistent with this line of thinking is that local food travels less distance from the fields to the fork, which can reduce toxic emissions and decrease greenhouse effects. Thus, it is possible to state beyond doubt that local food is better for our health as well as the environment. Okay, so here's where you talked about the environment. So I'm very glad to see that you did that because I was really, really concerned here. Now, let me explain to you why. It all becomes very clear now. Here you wrote on the one hand, so that led me to believe that you were going to discuss both sides of this issue. So here you were going to talk about the positives of eating local, and in contrast, that's where the on the other hand comes in, you were going to talk about how maybe it's not so important and how we gain a lot from eating food from exotic locations. Okay, so reading this on the one hand, and then seeing all of this, the positive impacts, etc., the economy, I assumed that you had neglected to write about the environment. So, as we already saw, that's not what happened though. So it's essentially a misuse of these linking words has created a much larger problem that affects your task achievement and your coherence and cohesion. Okay, so I want you to be super careful with how you use these cohesive devices, when you use them, and which ones to use. All right, so now another thing that I want to talk about. Supposedly this paragraph should be focusing on this element of the question, the environment. All right, if we assume that this paragraph talked about the economy, this paragraph should focus on the environment. And it did. However, it only did towards the end of the paragraph. Look at this. You wrote about 4.5 lines that had nothing to do with the environment, and then suddenly in the last 3 lines you started writing about the environment. And that's a little bit of a problem for me as well. So it's a lot of information which is, yeah, it's useful, it's interesting, but I don't know how relevant it is to this task. Okay? It never said it's better for health. If it had said it's better for our health, then sure, that would make sense. Or if it had said that all of these preservatives or all of the fertilizers and such that we use hamper in some way or damage the environment, then it would make sense. But it didn't. So a lot of this information is really irrelevant. It's not focused. It's not a focused paragraph. So you really need to be careful, okay? So what we're essentially dealing with is a couple of different problems in this essay. One is with task achievement because you've got a lot of information that is not on topic, and then another one is with your cohesive devices. They led me to believe that you were going to develop your paragraphs in a different way than you did. Okay, so let's look at your conclusion. From the arguments and examples given, I firmly believe that it is best to eat local in order to support the local economy, protect the environment, and lead a healthier life. It is predicted that awareness of local food benefits will increasingly grow in importance. Okay, that part's fine, apart from the little grammatical problems that are there. Otherwise, it's okay. Let's take a look at your task 1, as I think I went into quite a bit of detail about the areas that need a little work in your task 2. This one is the chip manufacturers, France, 2017. Let's see what you said. This bar, we don't call it a bar graph. We call it a line graph. We call it a bar chart, a pie chart, and so forth. Okay, so this is incorrect. It should be this bar chart illustrates the monthly distribution of chip sales in the thousands for 2 manufacturers, comma, Intel and AMD, comma, in France during 2017. Intel sales started at 50,000 and progressively increased until they reached 95,000 in March, whereas AMD sales, no, you can't say which halved, you can say which were half those of Intel's in January, reached, not had reached, reached their highest peak at 125,000 in February, then significantly decreased to 75,000 in March. All right, it's fine. So you decided to do it in like quarters, I guess. So far, so good. Intel sales demonstrated a similar pattern in the second quarter as they increased, you don't need this had here, to 90,000 and 125,000 in May and June, respectively. On the other hand, AMD's sales consistently decreased until they reached their lowest sale point of 0 in June. All right, that's good. For the remainder of the year, Intel sales generally increased, although small decreases of less than 5,000 were noted in November as well as December. Intel. Okay. Hold on a second, though, because if we're talking about Intel, you forgot to mention that there was this huge drop here, and that's pretty important, don't you think? So you were at 125,000, and suddenly you dropped 100, a full 100,000. So you probably should have mentioned that, no? Okay. Because look, you mentioned here 125 in May and June, respectively. Okay. Let's see. In contrast, AMD sales generally decreased during this time period, although there was an increase in September and December to 90,000 and 35,000 respectively. Overall, the amount of chip sales fluctuated considerably for both manufacturers, but the highest sales were completed by Intel in June, while the lowest sales reported were from AMD in November. That's not really true. I mean, in June, there were no Intel sales at all. So maybe what you should have said instead was that Intel had the highest sales in June and the lowest in July, while AMD had its highest sales in February and its lowest in June. Maybe that would have been a better way to express this, okay? So while a lot of this is really quite good, there are some areas that I would have liked to see a little better developed, a little more accurate, maybe including some of the stuff that you did not. Like, I thought this was a really, really important period of time here, and there was quite a bit you could have said about this, okay? Now what I need you to do, Camille, is correct these essays. So correct them based on this video correction, add to your error correction list, and write a new set of essays. We're waiting to see what you do next. So just to give you a little extra feedback, I've pointed out some of the areas that were problematic. I think I talked about some of the things that were good, some of the things that I liked. If I didn't mention it, then it means that it was nothing that really drew attention, so it was fine. All right, go ahead and correct these, your error correction list and your new set of essays. Okay, good luck to you, and I'm waiting to see what you write next.